My parents ghosted me 5 years ago after my wedding and now reached out. What do I do? I'm married to my former boss. Parents did not take the marriage as well as I'd hoped and ignored me for 5 years, only to reach out when they saw a fifth anniversary Facebook post that mentioned our kids. Do I let them back in, or do I ignore them? My husband, 30M, used to be my boss. About 9 years ago, I started working as his assistant. We spent about 2.5 years ignoring our mutual attraction until we gave in. We then went to HR, who reassigned me, and the whole thing was strictly above board from the time we began dating. I got pregnant about a year later, and my husband and I decided to just get married. While we'd only really been dating for about 1.5 years, we knew each other completely, loved each other, lived together, and there was a baby on the way. We knew how it would look, but I had to leave the company anyway due to problems with my new boss, so we didn't anticipate this causing any issues, except with my parents. They, 62EM/57F, have always been overprotective, so I knew they wouldn't like me dating my boss and hadn't told them. But I had to tell them if I wanted them at my wedding. We decided to be mostly honest with them about how it was strictly professional until it wasn't, how the second it got unprofessional, we went to HR, how he had never taken advantage of me, but now we wanted to get married and we wanted them there. We did not mention the baby because I felt that giving them that information in addition to the rest all at once would just break them. I was only about 4 months along when the wedding happened, so the bump was easily hidden by a flowy dress. The wedding itself went off without a hitch, and apart from my mother pulling me into the bathroom shortly before the ceremony to ask if I was sure about this, which I said I was, my parents seemed to take it well. The ceremony and reception were at two different venues, and we had to travel from one to the other, and my parents never arrived at the reception. I called them and got ignored, and then my brother called them and they told him that they were going home. I don't remember the exact reason they gave, but it amounted to them being tired and uncomfortable. I tried contacting them after the wedding, but found that I was blocked on everything except email, which I used to send them a long letter essentially saying that I'm an adult who made an adult choice, and I hope they can respect that. 5 years later, I've not heard from my parents since my wedding. My husband and I are not big on social media in general, but I recently posted something for our fifth anniversary in which I mentioned our two kids and third on the way. Within a month of making this post, my parents left a voicemail saying they saw the post, and having had no idea that they had grandchildren previously, now want to meet them. I haven't responded, and there have been a few follow-ups since then asking why I haven't. I don't know what to do, but my gut instinct is that 5 years is too long, and it's about the kids, not about them respecting my choices or relationship. However, I can't help but feel that I'm being unfair, and my brother agrees, because I told them in my email that if they could learn to respect my choice and my marriage eventually, then we could talk, and now I'm retroactively applying a time limit. Edit. Can't find a way to work this in organically, but my husband is not white. I am, as are my parents. I don't think this is a race thing or that my parents are racist, and neither does my husband, and we don't understand why they would want to meet our mixed-race children if they were racist, but this element is still gnawing at me. Should I reach out to them? If I did, how would we go about rebuilding the relationship? Update TLDR. They're racists. I asked to talk yesterday. We were on Zoom within an hour. It was my parents and me and my husband. They asked to see the kids, and I said they could see them eventually, dependent on them earning our trust and convincing us they were going to be positive additions to the kids' lives. They asked to start by reading me a letter that they claimed to have written on my wedding day. It said that they were uncomfortable with me marrying my former boss as they thought he took advantage of me. So they left between the wedding and reception to avoid a scene. But they wanted me to know they were here for me despite their issues with him. They added that they would have sent this to me the morning after my wedding. But then I sent my email about them needing to respect my choices, and they were so ashamed they couldn't bring themselves to send theirs. Seeing my anniversary post made them realize how much they've missed in 5 years, and they really don't want to miss anymore. I had some questions like what the big deal was with me marrying my former boss, and they said that it just wasn't what they had in mind for my wedding day and my future spouse. I asked why they even came to the wedding at all if they didn't support the marriage. And my dad responded that he wanted to walk his daughter down the aisle as it was the only chance he'd get. The way it was phrased implied that they had intentionally only come to the wedding so he could give me away, and always planned to leave halfway. And because he said my daughter and didn't talk to me directly, it was pretty clear he was thinking about my older sister, who passed away. My husband caught that too, and said that if they were talking about me, they should address me directly, Then added that if they had planned to leave, they should have told us as we wouldn't have invited them. And the fact they waited 5 years to reach out was going to take more reasons than shame, as a father, he didn't understand how they could ignore their daughter for years, or only get back in touch when we had kids. My dad snapped that he wasn't going to take this from a kushi, a slur meaning dark-skinned. My mother immediately tried to run damage control, but I ended the call. They have since messaged me several times trying to explain that calling my husband a racial slur wasn't indicative of a racist attitude, and he wouldn't have said that in front of the kids, so they should still get to meet them. I've spent 5 years wondering how they were so offended by me marrying my boss that it earned no contact for half a decade. Turns out they're just racist. It's almost nice to find out. If it was just the boss thing, I would have sympathy for them, and we might even be able to reconcile. But with this, it's now just a question of if I'm going to knowingly expose my mixed race children to a couple of racists, which I am obviously not going to do. Story 2. My boyfriend doesn't want to marry me because I'm an immigrant. I, 29F, moved to the US 7 years ago as a grad school student from Indonesia. I met my boyfriend, 30M, a few months after I moved, and we've been together ever since. My boyfriend is a US citizen. After I graduated, we had a serious discussion about where our relationship was headed. I made it very clear that I wanted to eventually get married and have children. My BF echoed the sentiments. I remember asking him if he saw that happening with me because I didn't want to be in a relationship with no future. He told me he loved me and that we were definitely headed in that direction. As of last week, we've been dating for 7 years. We've occasionally talked about marriage, but we were both busy with our respective careers, so the timing didn't seem quite right. However, recently my company announced that there's a chance that my department's work will be outsourced. I'm on an H-1B visa, temporary worker, so this means that I need to start looking for a job ASAP if I want to continue staying in the US. Last week during our anniversary, I brought this up. I asked him if he thought it was the right time to think about getting married, as that will also help with sorting out my visa issues. He looked like he was about to vomit. After much prodding, he confessed that he wasn't planning on us getting married before I was able to get a green card, permanent resident, in the US. I was incredibly confused because he'd never mentioned this before. His reason was that he didn't want to be used as a visa mule, his words not mine, by me, and that he wanted to make sure that I married him because I loved him and not because it was a ticket to getting to stay in the US, which can only happen when I get a GC. It took me a while to process what he said, and I asked him if he'd be okay to move to Indonesia with me, which he wasn't. I did not react well and ended up leaving because I couldn't deal with what just happened. I am still in disbelief. I started dating him because he was the kindest, most thoughtful, and generous man I'd met. I now feel like I wasted 7 years. While the visa issues are certainly a problem, I did not date him with the intention of making him my safety net. I cannot believe that even after nearly a decade together, he doesn't know what kind of person I am. I feel like this relationship is possibly over and it hurts. It hurts so much. Update. A few days back, I made a post about how my BF of 7 years didn't want to marry me because I was an immigrant on an H-1B, and he didn't want to be a visa mule. I got a lot of wonderful comments and DMs, a few trolls too, but that's expected from Reddit, haha. Because the thread got locked and the post was subsequently removed, because I have a low karma account, I was unable to respond to anyone. I'm posting this update to do that, plus add in some more things that have transpired since. TLDR at the bottom. Addressing some of the stuff in the comments, I've been on an H-1B visa for a bit more than 2 years now. I was on STEM OPT for about 3 years after grad school. I had terrible luck with the H-1B lottery, and I got one in the last round I was eligible to apply in. Getting PR in the US is not easy. I know people who've been here for 15 plus years who are still waiting for their PR. For those of you who DM'd me calling me a gold digger, you guys made me LOL. I'm aware of the legalities around sponsoring a spouse for a PR, including the financial aspect. It shouldn't have been a problem for the following reasons. I'm a STEM major who recently shifted into management. I work for a large company, and I do quite well for myself. My boyfriend is a teacher, and our incomes are not comparable. He earns around $60K. I earn close to $300K. We've been living together for 6 years. We have a shared account to pay for expenses like rent and utilities that we both deposit a percentage of our salary into. The rest of our money goes into our own private accounts, and we don't manage each other's money. Because I'm pretty frugal, I've saved up quite a bit of money in the form of savings plus investments. If my boyfriend was worried about the legality of sponsoring me financially for 10 plus years, I would have happily discussed moving the money around. I was even considering buying a house, so we could have made that a joint ownership thing. The point is, we could have figured it out. I haven't relied on him financially ever, and I didn't intend on doing that in the future. I might not have considered everything, but you have to note that I thought about the marriage for visa thing very recently, only when the threat of possibly having to leave loomed over me. This isn't something I'd thought about in detail at all. Regarding my situation back home in Indonesia, I come from a very religious and conservative family and had a horrible childhood. My family doesn't support my career choices. I cut contact with my family when I moved to the US, so they are not in the picture at all. I was on great terms with BF's family. They loved me. Now, for the actual update, he is now my ex-boyfriend. I took a few days to collect myself and then reached out to him wanting to talk. He agreed. It turns out that he has been insecure about earning less than I did for a while. Apparently, his friends have been poking fun at our relationship, calling me the sugar mommy because I take care of most of the expenses. He never told me this until now. He apparently didn't feel like an equal because our pay differs so much, and started feeling that I was only with him as a quick way to get a PR here. I was speechless. I couldn't believe that his friends gaslighted him into doubting our relationship. I reminded him how he had supported me when I was in grad school, like getting me groceries when I had little money to spare, allowing me to stay with him rent-free in my last year of grad school to help me minimize expenses so I didn't have to take out a loan, letting me use his car when I was attending interviews. I told him that he did them because he loved me, and me taking on the majority of household expenses, since I started working, is my way of paying him back for all the things he did for me back then. He said that he gets what I'm saying, but also that he didn't expect me to start earning more than him straight off the bat. I asked if there was any chance he'd consider going to couples therapy, like some of you had suggested, and he declined because he didn't think he was being unreasonable. He said that he wanted to be the provider in a relationship and that he didn't feel like one in ours, so there's no going back from this unless I quit my job and found another that paid substantially less, which isn't going to happen. Well, long story short, we broke up. His family is in disbelief. They were hoping that he would propose soon. I've moved into an Airbnb for now. A little bit of good news to end this update with. My company offered me a similar role in a different department. However, this is based out of France, and there's a small decrease in pay. I've always dreamed about living in Europe, and I've accepted this offer. I've signed the relocation agreement, and I'll move there in the next 12 weeks. TLDR. Boyfriend was insecure about earning less than me. Boyfriend has now become ex-boyfriend. Company offered a new job in France, leaving US in 3 months to start a new life in France. Story 3. I am leaving my wife tomorrow, and I couldn't be happier. I, 45M, and my wife, 44F, have been married for 10 years. We dated for 6 years before that, and I got a lot of pressure to get married from my parents, her. Something in my gut said that this wasn't right. I called it cold feet and did my best to ignore it. We got married. Pretty much the moment the ink was dry on our marriage license, things went south. On our honeymoon, she did nothing but complain I hadn't booked a nicer hotel. In the following months, she wanted a new apartment, a new car, gifts, jewelry, handbags. It was never enough. It's like the moment she got the ring, it stopped being about me and became about what I could give her. I am a doctor. I make good money. Not good enough to support the kind of lifestyle she wants, though. We don't have sex anymore. We don't laugh. We don't talk about anything but money. We have no kids. She said she wanted them before marriage, then changed her mind. Our home looks like a showroom. There is no warmth or joy or even comfort here. I hate it. I hate her. I am a 45-year-old physician, and I have barely enough savings to sustain us for 3 months. I want to retire someday. I want to enjoy my life. I rented a cool apartment across town in a less desirable neighborhood, and there's a stack of IKEA furniture waiting for me to set it up there. The lease is up on the Mercedes my wife pushed me to lease next month, and I will be replacing it with a used Prius. I'm starting therapy next week. I have a divorce attorney who has assured me that the prenup we signed before marriage means I won't have to pay alimony. I hope to leave the higher-paying job that my wife insisted I take for something with less hours, sometime in the next year. I'm going to ask out the pretty barista who flirts with me every morning. I'm telling her first thing tomorrow. I'm expecting her to cry and beg and demand we try therapy. I don't want any of that. This was never right. And I'm only sorry it took me so long to realize it. I'm sorry I've wasted so much of my life being married to a woman because I thought it was the right thing. I'm so excited. Update. Tried to post separately, but it was taken down. Posted today. First of all, damn. I didn't expect the first post to blow up. I really was getting it off my chest and expected a few good luck comments and not much more. I know a lot of people were asking for an update, so here goes. Usually when I wake up, I go for a run or a bike ride. While I'm gone, my wife gets up, gets dressed, gets a smoothie going, whatever. This morning I paced the kitchen, rehearsing what I had to tell her over and over again. When she finally came down, I felt oddly calm. I wasn't expecting to be panicked exactly, but apprehensive at least. I told her I needed to speak to her. She gave me an uh-huh and didn't look up from the coffee machine. Then I just came out with it. I told her I was leaving and that I wanted a divorce, that we hadn't been happy in a long time, and I felt as though she didn't care about me or my emotional needs. Pretty much instantly, the gaslighting began. She cried that I never get her flowers anymore, that I don't do enough to support her, that I don't care if she's happy. I brought up the fact that I suggested therapy over a year ago, and she agreed, but then made excuse after excuse not to go. I brought up the times she completely ignored the budget we worked on. I told her how it made me feel when she dismissed me when I tried to tell her how I was feeling. The crying escalated then, along with begging for a chance to make this right, to go to therapy, that she would be better. It went like I thought it would go, and I felt absolutely nothing. I don't care anymore. Whatever I once felt for her is just dead and gone, and she might as well have been a second cousin sobbing about her marriage for all the connection I felt to it. Eventually, I just got fed up and walked out. She has been blowing up my phone with calls and texts which range from angry to begging to threatening. I started getting calls from her mother and mine too, but the end of the day. I spoke briefly to my mother and calmly explained that I was sorry she didn't hear it from me, but my wife was sucking me dry financially and emotionally, and I couldn't do it anymore. She was surprisingly supportive. I'm currently in my new apartment. I unrolled the mattress in a box and went to Walmart for sheets. I ate Thai takeout for dinner at the kitchen counter and watched a bit of Netflix on my computer. I have everything I need for the next few days. My wife is getting served tomorrow. I keep expecting the sadness to set in, but it hasn't. I feel like 1,000 pounds are off my shoulders, and suddenly my future is full of possibilities. I'm going to travel. I'm going to try new restaurants. I'm going to take a job that actually makes me happy and proud instead of rich. Much to the internet's chagrin, I will ask out the barista, because despite unpopular opinion, she is both age appropriate, it's her family's business, and I do have the interpersonal skills to recognize the difference between customer service and actual connection. Cheers, everyone. I'm going to have a beer and then take a walk around my new neighborhood. All right, folks. I've gotten a lot of comments begging me not to ask out the barista as it's her job to be nice to me. I didn't really get into the relationship I have with her because I didn't think it was relevant to the divorce. But here goes. I met her about a year ago. She's 30. I don't usually wear a wedding ring because my job requires me to scrub regularly. She actually asked me out, invited me to a food truck festival in town, a few months into knowing each other. I said I was married and she was embarrassed. Since then, we've had a bit of a running joke going where she asks me, "So, still married?" My current plan is to reply, "Not for long," and see what happens. I appreciate the internet's apprehension. In truth, I would probably say the same thing if I didn't know the backstory, but I promise I'm not a creep. Story 4. My wife and her best friend accused me of having an affair, then got angry when I didn't have one. I, 31M, and my wife, 29F, had a baby last December. It was a traumatic birth, and my wife developed postpartum depression. While she was originally going to go back to work after the birth, she's been struggling enough that we decided to wait until our daughter was a year old and reassess. She has been going to therapy weekly. With my wife home full-time, I've had to work increased hours. This is something we discussed prior to making this decision, and she knew this from the start. A few weeks ago, my boss approached me about a project that would require a lot of overtime in a short amount of time. It would both be great financially and for my career. I talked to my wife about it, and she agreed that I should say yes to my boss. For the 4 weeks I'd be working on this, my MIL and her best friend Jessie, 29F name changed, would come help out with some of the duties that I typically do. Jessie is a SHM with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. She began coming over during the day and would watch the kids with my wife. 3 weeks into the project, it became clear that we'd need a few more weeks to get it together. I went home that night and talked to my wife about it. She said she was okay with it, but got very cold in the days after. It wasn't unusual behavior over the past few months, so I didn't think much about it and tried not to take it personally. During the last week of the project, I got home one night and saw that Jessie was still at the house. I didn't think much about it, said hi to her and my wife, and then went to go check on our daughter. Before I could get to her room, I heard Jessie say something along the lines of, "He doesn't even stop to greet you. Definitely a sign." I turned around and asked what it was a sign of. Immediately, my wife started crying and Jessie started accusing me of having an affair. She told me that I must hate my wife because she has PPD and am not attracted to her because she gained weight from the pregnancy. Neither of these things are true. I'm trying my best to help my wife through her PPD while supporting our family. And I think she looks great how she is right now. She just hasn't wanted to have sex and I haven't pushed. Jessie then demanded to see my phone. I told her no. She told me that's a sign that I'm guilty. I told my wife that I would let her see my phone if she wanted to. She nodded and something inside me broke. I guess it was the thought that she actually believed I was having an affair really got to me, and that she didn't trust me after everything we've been through. Well, she looked through the phone and there was no evidence. Jessie started saying that I deleted the evidence. She started screaming and woke up our daughter, so I told her to get out of the house. Eventually, she left, and I went to calm our daughter since my wife was still on the couch crying. When my daughter was asleep again, I sat down by my wife and tried to talk to her about what's been happening. She told me that she's been worried ever since I started working all the overtime. I told her that we'd talked about how good of an opportunity it was, and she agreed to letting me take on this project. She said it was very suspicious to increase the length of the project. I told her that sometimes that happens. She wanted more evidence, so I showed her messages and emails with timestamps from work and pay stubs showing the OT. She said she believed me and was sorry for doubting me. It was just that Jessie had been telling her that these were all signs that I was cheating. I asked her why she believed Jessie more than me, and why she didn't come to me with her concerns. She didn't have a real answer. It's been a couple weeks and the project is over. I actually scaled back and am trying to work a little less than I was before the project, so I can spend more time with my wife and daughter. But I feel so burnt out trying to do everything and becoming resentful because, in the back of my mind, I know that my wife doesn't trust me. I ask myself, what happens the next time I have a project? Or I have to run errands one day? Or if I have a business trip? Am I going to come back every time to accusations that I'm cheating? I've tried bringing it up a couple times, but my wife tells me it's not the time and that she's tired or sad. I try to be mindful of her feelings, but I wonder if that means that I can never have any of my own. I'm not sure what to do here. Any advice for how I can move forward? Update. Thank you to everyone for all of the advice and support on my previous post. I think a lot of you pointed out what should have been obvious, that I need to get a therapist and start looking after my own mental health. A couple people asked for an update, so I'm giving one, but it's not happy. That night, I approached my wife and told her that I was going to find a therapist. I didn't connect it to her accusations or anything, just said that I was having a tough time and needed therapy. She shrugged and told me to do whatever. Next day, I got home from work, and our room and my home office were ripped apart. Things everywhere. Important papers scattered. I don't see her, but our daughter's in her room crying. My wife left her alone, her cell phone's off. I call my in-laws and a few friends, but no one's seen her. I'm starting to get worried, and I call my mom to see if she can babysit while I go out and look for her. Before my mom can get home, my wife gets back. Jessie's driving. Jessie doesn't come in. She hasn't been back in the house since I kicked her out because she was offended by my behavior. But my wife does. She's clearly upset, been crying. I ask what happened. I thought at first the house might have been robbed. She starts screaming at me that I'm being unfaithful and that the therapy is a front so I can meet my mistress. I try to calm her down and tell her that's not true. But she came at me and she hit me. My nose is broken. She kind of realized what she did and sat down on the couch and went comatose, just stared at the wall. I went into my daughter's room and locked the door. Called my mom to tell her what happened. She was already on her way. And my MIL to ask her to come over and take care of my wife. I packed a bag for my daughter, and when my mom got there, we left. My wife didn't even look up. We dropped my daughter off with my dad, and then went to urgent care for my nose. I got blood all over my mom's new Subaru. My daughter and I are staying with my parents for a while, and my wife's staying with hers. I am looking into getting a restraining order against Jessie. My wife and I are separating. I love her, but I won't live with someone who hurts me and who could potentially hurt our daughter. I am not going forward with a divorce yet, with the hopes that my wife will get the treatment she needs and we can work things out. My in-laws told me that they're looking at inpatient treatment at a local hospital, but I also have everything well documented in case of an eventual custody battle. My heart's broken because I know this isn't my wife. This is a sickness in her mind. But I need to keep myself and our daughter safe and give her the space to recover. I'm hoping that this is the right decision. Thanks again, everyone. Edit. Thank you all for your feedback. I've talked to my parents after reading your comments and came to the conclusion that for my daughter's protection, I need to file a police report. I am headed to the station now. Do I let the woman I fault with my wife's death, let her speak at her funeral? September 21st, 01. TLDR. A woman fed lies to my wife, suffering from postpartum depression that led to a mental breakdown and her death. She now wants to speak at my wife's funeral. Denying her would start trouble, which I'm not sure would be worth it. There's more context for this situation in my post history. My wife passed on early Monday morning, convinced by her friend Jessie that I was having an affair that I did not have. She had a mental break, which resulted in my taking our infant daughter and staying with my parents for a while. She was with her parents, who planned on taking her to the hospital for inpatient treatment on Monday. On Sunday night, she came to my parents' house and demanded I give her our daughter. Because she had left her alone for several hours the last time she was responsible for her and had gotten physical with me, I refused. I offered to let her come in and spend time with her while my parents and I were present, but she didn't want to come in and wanted to take our daughter with her. She was upset, but left eventually. A few hours later, she drove her parents' car into a tree and died. The friend, Jessie, came to see my daughter and me yesterday. After some tears, she told me that she was planning to speak at my wife's funeral. She had already cleared it with my in-laws but was letting me know as a courtesy. I told her she would not be speaking at the funeral. We fought, and she left after telling me that I was an asshole and not the only person who loved my wife. I talked to my in-laws, who are adamant that Jessie be allowed to speak. She and my wife knew each other since they were kids, and my in-laws are close to her. We're all very fragile right now, and I fear that pushing this further would hurt my relationship with my in-laws, which I don't want. Still, the thought of seeing Jessie up there at my wife's funeral makes me feel sick. I don't think I can stand to listen to her, knowing that she took joy in my wife's deteriorating mental health and picked up my wife, leaving my daughter home alone. That being said, I don't trust myself to make the best decisions right now. My mind's clouded by grief, guilt, and fear. My parents are split on what to do, and I don't have the energy to reach out to my friends. So I'm coming here again to ask for your advice. Thank you.